Hi, everybody. This is basically part two of an interview that I just did before with the other half of this amazing person who lives about a 5-minute drive from me. And I think I've known them, if I think back, we're probably getting close to 15 to 20 years too, since we first met at the U of M. So without further ado, amazing, special, very, very cool guest. Who are you?
I am Christopher Berti, and yeah, I'm a freelance musician, bass player, salesman, jack of all trades. That's me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what? I have, every time I've run into you through, whether it's you doing gigs or at Long and McQuaid, it's always been a fantastic experience. I feel very, very lucky to know you. And then I feel that I actually am just really getting to know you.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Gigs are tough because there's always folks around and things are happening, and you got to jump back up. And when you're at work and you're at the store, you got to get the business done and get on to the more business. But here we are,
Absolutely. So
sharing stuff. So yes,
we're gonna be a little Wayne's World here and go way, way back to baby Chris. How
okay.
in the world did you become a musician? What was your path? What started you on this?
Well, neither of my parents were musical, but they wanted me to be musical. So back in the 70s, we didn't have a whole bunch. We couldn't afford a piano, so they got me an accordion. And that was my first instrument when I was 5 and 6 and 7 years old. So I played the accordion, and I think had my first public performance on an accordion at that age, and quickly determined I didn't want to play the accordion anymore, but I liked the whole music thing. So my accordion teacher then taught me guitar for a little while, but he wasn't, of course, a very good guitar teacher. And then while all this was going on at school, they gave me a violin for a year. And then when I went on to junior high, they said, well, you can play whatever you want. And I was lucky enough back in my growing up in Toronto that our junior high school and high school had full orchestra programs. So we had all the strings and all the winds. We were separate in junior high, and then we got together in high school. But so I was big and I was tall, and I jumped on the bass, and so I was playing guitar with a teacher, and I was studying bass and having to travel all across the city in a bus and to go and take my lessons. But that's how I got into playing, and went off to do some university here, there, and everywhere. I was at Indiana University for a year, but I had a really good time. I paid for a very expensive party, but I learned a lot, but not about playing the bass necessarily. And then I went to University of Toronto for a year, where, true fact, I went to the university with a bass player from the Bare Naked Ladies, Jim Cregan. Hey, Jim Cregan, if you're out there watching.
Very cool.
Him and I were acquainted back in the Much Music days. And the year that I was there, my teacher actually died, the poor gentleman. He was an older fellow, and he passed away halfway through my year. And then, much like my wife, who you talked to earlier, Mary Lynn, she moved out west. I also moved out west because one of my friends had moved out there. So I lived in Vancouver and had a whole other life in Vancouver, and played with I didn't bring my bass with me when I went initially. I was just going to go and work, and was working in the computer industry, and actually had worked for Microsoft in Mississauga, and went off and sold computers and did stuff with computers. But I couldn't be without playing, so I had my folks pack my bass up, which was expensive to pack up a large double bass and send it across the country, but it made it in one piece. And I joined a Celtic band there. It was a 6-piece band, and toured all over BC and played into the States and did big festivals. And that was a whole bunch of fun. But when my time in Vancouver was done, I moved to Calgary for a little bit and sort of reaffirmed my love for playing orchestral music and classical music, and started taking some lessons, and was suggested to me that I come back here to Manitoba, or not back, but go to Manitoba at the time. And
Was that your first time coming here?
I had sort of been back and forth, but I'd never come through for a visit. And I'd never, in my travels, when I drove to Vancouver, I actually went through the States, so I didn't even drive through Manitoba at the time. But so no, I had not heard of the wonders of Winnipeg, but I knew I didn't like Calgary. Sorry to anybody from Calgary. Too many cowboys. So yeah, someone suggested Manitoba, and at the time Eric Hansen was teaching bass and teaching a bunch of other stuff, and I look forward to going and study with him, but he informed me the day of my audition, after I did very well at my audition, thank you very much, that he was heading back to the promised land. He was going to, oh my goodness, Salt Lake City to teach at Brigham Young University. So he requested that I can join him and study with him down there, but I was not going to go back to the States again after having spent all my money there the first time. And yeah, since I've been in Manitoba, I've never gotten a degree. I've been to 3 universities, no degree. Always too busy playing, always too busy out working. And yeah, maybe not a big attention span. That's probably the biggest part of it. But since I've been in Manitoba, I've been a freelance player, generally on the upright bass, and I've probably played with everybody in the city at some point or other, either in a big or small capacity, and I've made lots of friends, and it's a wonderful community. And here we are sitting out talking on the computer in the middle of the virus.
So you may not have gotten a degree here, but you met Mary Lynn.
I did. That's our running joke, right? That I didn't get a degree, but I got a lovely wife, and I probably am the better for it. So there you go. Money well spent. There you go.
And I still can't. I can't get the image of you playing accordion out of my head. That's going to be stuck there. You know, it is either in the 70s, right? It was either you were made to play accordion or organ.
Well, well, yes, the organ was popular, but see, I came from Italian and Polish Ukrainian heritage, so everybody liked the polka, and if you could play the polka, that was it. I could have been a polka
German Ukrainian girl life. Here.
Yeah, I could have been a polka
musician. It's in our blood.
Yeah.
But, well, that's incredible. So now I'm kind of terrified to ask this, and I'm going to remind you it is a family show.
Yes.
What would be one of the weirdest gigs that you've been a part of through your travels and musical experiences?
Yes. I was mentioning the Mary Lynn one before, but she said, no, you shouldn't tell that one to the children, so I'll pass on that one. But, it was interesting for sure. But I remember when I played in British Columbia, like I said, we used to tour around, and we would go up into the mountains, into like Nelson and Caslow and oh my God, all these places, Salmon Arm. But anyways, there was this one place we went to, which I'm trying to remember the name of now. And it's totally gone for me. But anyways, it was sort of around Nelson, and it's all in the mountains. You drive for a long way, and there's nothing to see other than mountains until you get to the town of Nelson. And Nelson's sort of a weird town. It's sort of hippies and loggers and all sorts of fun things. And there's a big lake that it is on. So this town that we were going to play in, we had to stop in Nelson and then go like another 100 kilometers way around this lake and then way up this mountain. And when we got up to the top of this mountain, there was nothing but a hall, like nothing. The road just stopped. There was a hall that said post office, and there was no houses to be seen. There was no cabins to be seen. There was no cottages. There was nothing. So we had 6 people in 2 vehicles, and we loaded in all our stuff. We set up for this show, and this was a nice hall. It was a decent size, and just waited to see what was going to happen. And within a few hours, everybody just started coming down out of the mountains. And there was rich people, and there were hippies, and there were shut-ins, and there were hermits, and they all just came in for this big party, and we had a huge party until the wee hours. And because of course we're out in the middle of nowhere, and we were all billeted in various places with the people that lived in the community. So I got lucky, and I got to stay in this beautiful mansion that sort of overlooked the mountains, and there was a light snow, and we're all sitting in the hot tub. And then my 2 friends ended up in the band. They were married, so they had to stay together, and they ended up with the hippies living in a shack that had no we were sleeping on a straw floor. And so but anyways, that's probably one of my most magical gigs. I don't know that anything necessarily extra special happened, other than the fact that it happened when it seemed like nothing was going to be there at all. So
no kidding. It's they just appeared. They built it and they came.
Exactly. He was creeping in out of everywhere, and they were all very happy to see us, because I guess it's not a common occurrence for them to have an occasion like that in that particular community. And I wish I could remember now, but yeah. Anyways.
Very, very neat. So what words of advice would you have for anybody who's thinking about going into music as a career?
Well, going into music career, first off, there's a lot of things that encompass music as a career, and sometimes you start thinking that you're going to be one thing and you end up being something else. So the first thing I'd say is be open to lots of potential and lots of possibility. Play to your strengths. If you are a studious sort and like to sit for hours at a time and work on one thing over and over and over until you get it right, then you're probably going to do very well as a musician. If you're the creative sort and you like messing with sound and playing with noises and computers and doing all that, there's a future for you being a musician as well. But the one thing I will say is that, especially now that we find ourselves with so much time on our hands, that put the time into it, because you can't You can't press a button and be a magical player. You can't push a button and know all the repertoire you need to know. You know, this is your time to figure all these things out. I would also say that spend a lot of time listening. Listen to what your friends are doing. If your friends are involved in music, listen to anything that tickles your fancy. Every time you put on something on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, you kids and your buttons and your internets, I don't know. But every time you push those buttons, they always says, well, maybe if you like that, you should listen to this. Well, maybe you should. And I know the a lot of people these days is like, oh, I'll listen to 10 seconds of that. That was okay. But, you know, put them all the way through. Take a record and listen to it from front to back, or take that symphony and listen to the whole thing one end to another. Because what else are you going to do? You sit and play on your Minecraft. You can do that while you're listening to your symphony. You can get all those things done at once. So
you actually have one of the best collections I know of. I know for CDs and vinyl, don't you?
Yes, I do have a lot of records. I think when I moved to Vancouver at that point, I had 2,500 CDs, but I've cleared out a lot of those over the years just because it was a pain to move them around, and I've moved around a lot being a musician. And I used to have a hard drive with more stuff that on it that there should have been on it, but it died, and I was very sad about that. But yeah, I spend a lot of time listening. I'm just anything that drops in front of me, and I don't care if it's new or if it's old or if it's a style that I wouldn't necessarily associate myself being able to play. Listen. It's
and
great.
there is really something to be said for listening to an album in its completion.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially, I mean, maybe not so much for the stuff that's been, you know, released in the last few years, because people are sort of playing to that market. They say, oh, well, people are only really going to, if I don't hook you in the first 10 seconds, you're never going to listen to the whole song. So, and, you know, or they're playing for the video. They're trying to make something that's going to go good with a video or what have you. But when you go back into the 80s and 70s and 60s and anything beyond that, there was this idea that it was a complete package. It was like, you know,
It's
you
a
got
story.
a picture. It's exactly, and sometimes in the grand scheme where there's a full concept album that goes from one end to another that gives you a whole sort of like a play in words. In other cases, though, it's just, you know, that these people spend a lot of time writing this material and spend a lot of time putting in the right order and making sure that it all sounds cohesive and as a unit. Because you listen to a band, and how does the band shape its sound? Not one single at a time, or at least not as much now, but back in the day it was one album at a time, and you had to have that cohesive sound that connected. So I don't know, and sometimes, you know, yeah, you're familiar with the hits, but maybe there's 4 other songs on there that are awesome that you would have no idea about because you didn't take the time to sit and listen to it through.
Right, stare at the album art and look at the lyrics.
Oh, for sure.
Memorize them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there's no excuse. Like, you know, when back in our day, I was staying in Maryland. One of my albums that I had to line up at Sam the Record Man in Toronto on Yonge Street to get my copy of vinyl of Ghost in the Machine by the Police, because I really wanted to get Ghost in the Machine by the Police. I couldn't pre-order it and have it sent to my house. I couldn't just click a button and have all the songs pull up on the internet and whatever else. I had to go down and wait for it. If I wanted to hear something, I had to go to the library and take it out, or sit there and listen to it, or it was just, it's so, you know, you guys got no excuse. Listen.
Do you have maybe some top 3 artists you might recommend people listen to that you're really into right now?
My tastes tend to be long and wide and varied and jump all over the place depending on what mood strikes me. But what I would suggest, especially to all the young folks out there, all you young folks out there, you should, if you play a specific instrument, you should find people that play your instrument. You should find people that play it well, and maybe not necessarily in the genre that you expect. When we play in the concert band, we're used to hearing classical-ish music or pop tunes that are arranged for band or whatever else, but, you know, pull out the jazz stuff, find some weird classical things. There's all sorts of music that will highlight whatever instrument it is you play, and really stretch out and you know, go far into it, because that's how you figure out how to get your own sound, what you like, what you don't like, and, you know, where your future might lie with the instrument that you've chosen.
So you're not giving us any little favorites that you might, here's your favorite bassist at the moment?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, jazz bassist.
Jazz bassist. Well, there's my favorite bassist always is there's this gentleman whose name is Edgar Meyer. He's actually sort of he's a crossover guy. He's a bluegrass player. He used to win bluegrass violin, like fiddle competitions, but with him playing his bass, and he would kick all the violinists' butts because he was that good. And he's done albums with Yo-Yo Ma, with guys like Bela Fleck. He's done some crossover stuff with some East Indian gentlemen whose name I forget right now, but yeah, he can play with his bow anything he can think of, and all over the neck. Like, the range doesn't matter. He, you know, you can get 5-6 octaves out of that thing, and it's all just beautiful. So if you're a bass player and you're watching right now and you don't know who Edgar Meyer is, go right now and find all the stuff that you can find from Edgar Meyer, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you for that little tidbit.
Hey, there you go. You betcha.
And how about any extra worldly bits of wisdom, not even music related, just in these weird times, things that you might suggest people sort of focus on?
Well, I don't want to go too much into these weird times, because believe it or not, this too shall pass and life will get back to normal, and
of course
we will forget about it and move on and have all our dreams and everything else. But the thing I will say to everybody, especially all you musical folks there one more time, is always say yes. Yes is the answer. Don't always say no. I had a 9-year-old. Every time I talk to him, he's like, no, daddy, no, daddy, no, daddy, no. What? You got to say yes. If something comes your way and you think, well, you know, it's not something I would normally do, say yes. Get into it. Jump on. Try it. If it doesn't work, well, at least you tried it, right? Talking musical opportunities here, of course, not, you know, kids be good. But seriously, you know, I wouldn't have moved to Vancouver if I hadn't tried it. I wouldn't have toured around. I wouldn't have got on a cruise ship and done 32 countries in 6 months around the world if I just hadn't said yes, you know? So find those opportunities, say yes to those opportunities, know that nothing's permanent, and you can always say, oh, well, I tried, and move on to the next thing. So that's always what I'll tell you. Say yes to opportunity, and more will find you. That's for sure.
Fantastic advice. It has been so much fun to talk to you.
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, you too.
And I hope I get to see you in real life very, very soon.
Oh, I'm sure we can make that happen. You betcha.
Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, Joanne. Take care. Bye.
Bye.